Now the Bible tells us that the Israelites would be known by another name, that they would be a great seafaring people, a great agricultural people, great builders of cities and nations. None of these things is true of the Jewish people. The fact is that if we go back into Genesis chapter 3, verses 14 and 15, we will find that there are two different groups of people that the Bible talks about. Two different genealogies. And one genealogy is the genealogy of Jesus Christ, carried through from Adam and Eve, down through Abraham, down through Isaac and Jacob, and ultimately, of course, Jesus Christ. Now, Jesus Christ has relatives in Europe called the Caucasian people, and we're going to be demonstrating that we are in fact his relatives, and the Jewish people are not. In fact, he disowns the Jewish people in many places in the New Testament. Now, we know also that Queen Elizabeth II today is in fact a literal descendant of King David. And there's a parable of the 153 fishes in the New Testament. And it turns out that from Adam to Queen Elizabeth II, there are 153 generations in this genealogical record. So all these numbers in the Bible have meanings, and we are going to investigate these meanings. Now, the Jews have not had a king. The Jews have not had a king since the days of Herod Agrippa. In fact, the Jewish people have only had 4 or 5 kings in their entire history. The first one being Herod the Great. And then he had offspring who continued as kings in Judea until the Romans sacked Jerusalem in 70 AD. These are the only kings that the Jewish people have. But when we start quoting the marks of Israel, the true history, the prophetic record, and the historical record of the Israelite people, we will find that we have an unbroken genealogy, dynasty of kings from David down to Queen Elizabeth II. The Jewish people cannot say this because they are not the Israelites of the Bible. Now we're going to be discussing the greatest plot of the Bible, which has been a forgotten plot, and it talks about the missing Israelites. How did the Israelites become a missing people, and how are we going to rediscover this people in the modern world? I'm going to be quoting now from Romans 11, chapter 1, which tells us this. I say then, hath God cast away his people? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite, of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. So here Paul is telling us very clearly that he is a member of one of these 12 tribes. Now remember, earlier on I said that the house of Judah, the southern house of Judah, remained in Judea. And this house of Judah consisted of only 2 tribes, Benjamin and Judah. So Paul was in fact a member of the house of Judah, of the tribe of Benjamin, and distinguishing himself from the lost tribes, which were in Arsareth, which had already disappeared 700 years before. And I'm going to demonstrate to you that the Judahites of the days of Jesus Christ understood that their kinsmen, the dispersed Israelite tribes, were actually living around the area of Judea, in Greece, in Rome, in Armenia, in Europe, and they knew this. They knew these things. And the New Testament tells us that they knew these things. For example, James 1:1 tells us, it introduces the book of James by saying, to the 12 tribes of Israel scattered abroad, greetings. That's how that book opens up. So James clearly understood that all 12 tribes were still in existence in his time, and he sent his epistle to them. Okay? Now, in this synopsis of the disappearance and reemergence of the 12 tribes of Israel, we're going to demonstrate that Israel was divided into 2 houses, the 10-tribe northern house of Israel, and the 2-tribe southern house of Judah. Also, that the house of Israel rebelled against Yahweh's law, adopting pagan practices, and was taken captive by the Assyrians as punishment for their refusal to obey his laws. Number 3, well into the future, these Israelites will retain much of their pagan heritage, and in fact this is why we have so much pagan heritage in our European culture, such as Beltane, such as the Christmas tree, which actually goes back into Old Testament times, etc. Number 4, the house of Judah later on was taken captive into Babylon for a period of 70 years, but returned to Judah, the land of Judah, and reestablished their kingdom. So there is an unbroken genealogy from King David all the way to Queen Elizabeth II, and we will demonstrate that to you. The house of Judah had a distinct mission in the land of Judah to bring forth the Messiah. After the Messiah was brought forth and he performed his atoning sacrifice for his people Israel, that's when the history of the house of Judah in Judea ends. But we pick it up in Europe because we European Caucasians are in fact his genealogical relatives. Number 6, that the various tribes of Israel founded numerous nations, first in Europe and then all over the world. And as a matter of fact, Britain and America were established by the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Now ultimately, the two houses would one day be merged back together so that there would no longer be a separation of the two houses, and this was prophesied by the 2 sticks prophecy in the book of Ezekiel. Now in number 9, the nation where the physical reunification took place was in fact the United States of America, and this is according to prophecy. It's not that little nation in the Middle East of those unbelievers. Remember, Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians 6:14 not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. So what we are doing, we Americans and the rest of us true Israelites are doing by supporting that Jewish state, is we're actually supporting the Antichrist. We are not supporting the Christ at all, because that nation was never prophesied to be the regathering of the 12 tribes of Israel. I'm going to prove to you today that the United States of America is the regathering of the 12 tribes of Israel. Also, and finally, just before the judgment day, these people who don't know who they are, but will remember who they are, will, just before the return of Christ, remember who they are and become the bride of Christ.